Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Luke here for our weekly DFS live stream, my favorite time of the week. Going to break down what to expect for this weekend slate, the CJ Cup, over there in South Carolina this time. And one I'm going to be at in person. In fact, as soon as the stream's over, going to finish my lineups, get on to bed, wake up, and I'll be there for Thursday through Saturday. Would be there for Sunday, except my Pittsburgh Steelers are playing down here in Miami. A little bit of a family and friend affair. A bunch of me and my friends are going in my family. So got to catch that. So it'll be golf for Thursday through Saturday, and then our Pittsburgh Steelers game here on Sunday. So really, this is the optimal weekend for me. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's start talking about this golf. So let's go into the golf course as we usually do to start these live streams. And we actually have data here. So this is the first time the CJ Cup has been to Congaree Golf Club, but not the first time we've seen it in competition. And half the reason I'm even going to this event, well, it's twofold. First off, unbelievably cheap to go there. I mean, all of the lodging is literally like next to nothing, and it's pretty decent hotels. And then the tickets were literally next to nothing either. So it's only a 6-hour drive. It makes a lot of sense. But this golf course is in pristine condition. I mean, just ridiculously hard when it's playing firm and fast. It played close to a stroke over par, and that was despite getting a lot of rain. I mean, it could have played a lot harder than what it did there in 2021. And everything that I've seen from the low people on site at this point, some of the NBC reporters on site, are that it's extremely firm and fast, that balls are getting a solid 5 to 10 yard jump at times when you're hitting mid to long irons into greens. So you're going to see simulated almost like US Open, kind of like PGA Championship sort of conditions, as long as it doesn't rain. And as of right now, if we zoom out just to get a look at the general forecast here, you can see Thursday it's clear, doesn't look like much rain. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now there's a few more clouds here towards the end of Saturday, early morning on Sunday. So there might be a scattered shower or two. Like, it's South Carolina, right? Anywhere in the southeast, you're going to see quite a bit of precipitation this time of year. It looks relatively clear though. So those firm, fast conditions that make it such an interesting golf course should be there. And a reason for that is it's a sand-based golf course. It's kind of like what you see at a links style. You see it over there in England. They have a much more grainy soil there. And when you hit, you see explosions off of the turf. Whereas in the American Midwest, when you're on those bent grass fairways, you get those pelts that come up, right? It all stays together. It's a completely different feel of the strike. When you have that little bit of sand that comes up, that little bit of burst, you have to play shots differently. You have to try to flight your ball, particularly if it's windy out there, which for links golf is a huge factor of playing links style. Not so much here. The winds you can see for the forecast, especially if you go to the super forecast here, a little bit more accurate, you'll see it's 1 to 3 miles an hour of sustained winds, literally nothing. On Friday, there's a little patch where it gets up to like 13 mile an hour wind gusts, but really nothing to worry about. I mean, these players are going to be playing in a dome out there, but the greens, the fairways are going to be crunchy, and it's going to make it especially entertaining from the viewer standpoint. And also there's going to be like no one out there. If you guys watched the Palmetto Championship broadcast, I mean, I'm talking like 20 fans following the lead group. So I'm going to be out there. I'm going to have a first row seat to literally all of the best players in the world. And I have a feeling there might be like 20 to 50 fans because Ridgeland is a tiny town. I don't know if you've ever looked it up on Google, something like that. I had to, because I was like, what even is Ridgeland, South Carolina? It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So hopefully, I'm actually hoping there's not going to be many fans there so I can have that front row seat that I was talking about. And we're trying to look for a weather edge. You're not going to find one this week. Again, it's an invitational field, 78 players. They're all going out within, I believe, 4.5 hours of each other. So if you're going to try and find a minute difference between the quote unquote waves, let's say like the first 2 hours of tee times versus the last 2 hours or so, you're not going to find it because the winds are extremely flat on Thursday. And then on Friday, though they spike a little bit around 10 a.m., I mean, it's not that much of a difference. And if anything, the temperature is the thing that I'd keep the most eye on, right? Because something that people always forget to account for when it comes to playing DFS golf is the temperature. And you can see it's going to be extremely cold early in the morning. And I say extremely cold, guys, like South Carolina down here in Georgia, if it gets down to the 40s, that is ridiculously cold for us. I mean, that's like jacket kind of weather. The ball goes a lot shorter too, right? When it's hotter out there, the ball is going to travel a lot farther. So a 7,600-yard golf course, particularly some of those meaty par fours, might be tricky if you're starting on them there on the back nine. So if you're somebody that's starting on that backside and you're off early in the morning, that might be something to keep an eye on in terms of players starting in bad conditions. On Friday, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's like 45, 50 degrees there when they're teeing off around 15 a.m. Eastern time. Towards the afternoon, it heats up like 60, 65 miles. Sorry, I said miles an hour. Degrees Fahrenheit isn't really all that bad. But in the morning, that's going to have a huge effect on conditions. And by the afternoon, I would say the golf course is going to play longer than it did back there in 2021 because it's a lot cooler this time of year. When they played it, it was in June, the heat of summer. I mean, it was extra baked out because of that, right? After the rain they got early in the week was able to dry off. On Saturday and Sunday, the course played a lot more difficult than it did on Thursday and Friday. And this time around, right, it's in the winter. Right, you're not dealing with 90 to 100 degree temperatures down here in South Carolina, like you had for Kiowa Island, which is kind of like a similar golf course. I would say that Kiowa Island, from like the soil perspective, gives you exactly what you're looking for here. That soil base where you see those explosion shots, that sort of thing. But it's super windy, right? It's not going to be windy at all here because of the time of year, right? It's closer towards the winter. The winds tend to be a little bit lower that time of year, and it's just, again, it's not a true link style golf course. So don't look into it too much, but definitely from the visual standpoint, there's a lot of similarities. Outside of that, let's talk about this player pool now. So in terms of strategy, it's always going to be player by player. When we're playing Showdown, it can be a little bit more generalistic where we can say fade the guys at the top of the board because we know they're going to be the highest owned players. It's never that simple for 4-round contests. And that's why, maybe it's harder to find an edge, but you just got to work a little bit harder, right? You got to dive through all of the options. So it's mostly going to be ownership based. And what I've done here is we have all the core picks that I've talked about throughout the week. I have their updated ownership numbers on here. I've added in the value picks too, and then 5 fades and sleepers that I really want to highlight here in the live stream that I'm going to give you an idea of who's, some of the higher owned plays are on the slate. And specifically the ones that I don't think are going to be the best plays. So we'll start with Rory McIlroy at the top. Now, he's more than capable of winning this event, right? So he's 27% owned. A lot of people out there agree with that sentiment. And I couldn't argue against it. If you were to bet him outright, particularly if you're trying to do it in like a double format, because his odds are so low at this point, I'm all for it, right? I think he's got a solid chance at winning this event, but over 27% chance of winning? No, he does not. So I'm going to pivot just from a game theory perspective. He's the highest owned player on the slate. I have a hard time playing anybody when they get close to 30%, particularly when Jon Rahm is just a better course fit for me. And arguably coming in with the same form as Rory McIlroy. Jon Rahm's coming in off a win, had a second place finish before that. Rory McIlroy has a similar stretch of form where it's just a bunch of like top 4 finishes. They're both on fire at this point, both playing on the DP World Tour. So it was with a similar level of competition. Just Jon Rahm's the more accurate driver, right? Like when you look at their stats, what really differentiates Jon Rahm is he might not be as long as a Rory McIlroy off the tee, but he keeps it in play. And one key characteristic of this golf course is when you miss the fairways, you're in hell. You're immediately in a natural area. You're in the quote unquote native area, as they'll call it there on Shot Tracker. And a lot of times it's marsh. There's a sand base. So there's always going to be just a sandy area if you're in the quote unquote open. Rocks, fescue grass. There's just everything and anything that you could have on a golf course there in the hazard area. They have here at the almost at the Palmetto Championship, the course for the Palmetto Championship Congaree Golf Club. So all of that adds volatility if you're missing off the tee, which means you want guys that are not only hitting fairways, but aren't missing by much because they're 50 wide yard fairways. The guys that kind of can keep it in play and then every once in a while have a really big miss are still going to miss these 50-yard wide fairways. But somebody like a Jon Rahm, who when he misses a fairway, I don't know if you've watched this, guys. Some of these guys, when they miss fairways, it's by a yard or two, right? Jon Rahm is one of those players. Tom Kim is one of those players. There's certain drivers of the golf ball that, their driving accuracy stats aren't really indicative of their true accuracy off the tee. And there's a better stat for it. So it's not like we have to use conjecture for this. It's distance from the center of fairway. There's a PGA Tour driven stat that's out there. A lot of the databases, and I'm sure a lot of you have access to, have this stat on it. Use that. Corey Connors is the king of that category. Ches Reavie is a close second in that category. Those sort of players are hardly, if it ever, going to have to worry about these hazards because they're 50 wide yard fairways. So if you're an elite level accuracy guy, that kind of just raises your floor. I mean, that's really how I'm looking at some of those players. And when you have Jon Rahm's skill set, I mean, of late, if you look at his shots gained over there on the DP World Tour, has gained over 4 strokes putting in at least 2 out of his last 3 events, has been gaining across the board with the putter, I believe the last 4 events, just, very significantly in at least 2 of those starts, 10,900. I'm going to make that pivot all day. And it's not like he's drastically underowned. I mean, he's still 20% himself. It's just that I think off the tee, he's going to keep himself and play a little bit more than somebody like a Rory McIlroy. So that's my thoughts there. And right, Rory, because he's so long off the tee, he misses left to right a lot more often. When he misses, the ball is going to miss a little bit more offline because it's traveling a further distance. That's just a byproduct. It's proportional right there. And that's why guys like Rory McIlroy can get into trouble. Scotty Scheffler, now he's not the most accurate driver, right? So he's not getting the huge benefit like of Jon Rahm. But what I really like about Scotty is the iron play. I mean, when you look at his stats, they speak for themselves, right? Gaining over a stroke per round. That's outpacing Rory, Jon Rahm by quite a bit. Pretty much everybody down to a Tom Kim, who, of course, I love Tom Kim this week, right? Shouldn't be a surprise. I like the best 2 iron players in the field, and they're not getting all the love. And the big thing with Scotty is something that was brought to my attention today. He's got a new putter. It's a mallet-style putter. It's some sort of prototype that I haven't seen before. I think it's a prototype that hasn't been introduced anywhere before. Scotty Scheffler's bringing it onto tour, and it's either going to really help him, right? We've seen that, with Siwoo Kim. His putting stats have gotten a lot better after going out there and using the mallet putter. You have guys like Aaron Wise, where it had a similar sort of effect. But for all of those players that go out there and have success with the new putter, there are infinitely more stories of guys that switch putters and suck and then go back to the putter. And the thing is, you never hear about it, right? Because it was just a blip on the radar. The king of that is Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson now no longer in the picture here. We don't have to worry about him on the PGA Tour, but he would change putters round to round on tour. And usually it was to try and remind himself of why he wanted the other putter. Like he'd use it, he'd suck with the new putter for one round, go back to Old Faithful and succeed. I'm not going to look into the putter stuff all that much. It is impossible to quantify. Like I said, it's helped a few players, so maybe it will help Scotty, but there are just so many counterexamples that, I think it's hard to really judge that one way or the other. Just judge him on the shots gained stats. He's better on Bermuda than he is any other surface. The approach stats are there off the tee. We know that he can keep it in play, right? He's played well at U.S. Opens, PGA Championships, has been in contention, runner-up finisher at both of those sort of events. You have to be an elite off-the-tee player to do so. So I'm willing to play him. And honestly, the stat profile for this golf course is a major championship sort of style because you got to keep it in play. Off-the-tee play is of utmost importance. Off-the-tee distance is something I've actually become even more bullish on at this point of the week. In fact, to start the week, I thought it was more important than your accuracy, but even more so at this point, because from the overhead view, when I was doing that hole by hole analysis, I don't know if you guys noticed, there were a ton of spots where the longer players could cut off corners, could make a hole that's playing, let's say, at 540 yards, especially for some of the longer par fours, closer to 480, 490, something a little bit more digestible for a lot of these players. And a Ches Reavie isn't going to be able to do that sort of thing. He's not going to have the distance to leverage that sort of strategy. So distance matters, but so does accuracy. And if you're average in both categories, let's say you're just an average off the tee accuracy, average off the tee distance guy, I don't want to say you're unplayable, but you are borderline unplayable this week. You're going to run into issues off the tee. You're going to miss 4 or 5 fairways. We know that. That's just the average around this place, which is going to lead to a couple double bogeys. That's why the scoring average is over par here. There's 2 drivable par 4s, drivable par 5. That'd be nuts. And then there's 2 reachable par 5s. So there's 4 almost gimme birdie holes, depending on pin location. They can make it a little bit more tricky. And then you still have a scoring average over par. Just let me put that in perspective for you, right? This is a risk reward sort of golf course. If you're average off the tee, you're not going to be able to leverage those opportunities, right? Reaching the par fives isn't going to be something that's easy to do. Those reachable par fours aren't going to be in your arsenal. And then you're going out there and, leaving yourself susceptible to double bogeys all day. It feels like that middle tier of the shots gained off the tee is just going to get completely butchered this week. Like that's the way I see it. I think off the tee is by far the most important stat to hone in on here, because even with approach play, I've actually kind of lowered my weighting on it just a little bit here. These firm and fast greens, even when you hit a really solid iron shot, you may end up bouncing over the green, right? When you add in that variance with the firmness of these greens, it kind of de-emphasizes iron play. And it's not something that I love saying because it is the most important stat week to week on tour, but I'm gonna have to de-emphasize it just based on what I know from playing on firm and fast greens. It doesn't always reward the best iron shots, but rather short game and around the green play. So off the tee is important. I've boosted around the green to this point, and shots game putting on Bermuda, I would say it's of about average importance. I'm not really looking at it more than I would most weeks, nor less. I think it's right about average there. John Douglas has a question. So does Anointed Matt. We'll get to those right now. And then we'll hop into the rest of the poll. And it says, are certain players that are slow starters or others that pick up from last year's form? So I'm not sure what you're saying about the second part there, but yeah, are there certain players that are slow starters? Historically, yes, right? So you could look at round one scoring averages. That's a really good way to filter by that. And on the converse side, you have guys that are historically fast starters, right? I'm thinking of a Cam Young, for example. He's been first round leader, a handful of times. Keegan Bradley is a perfect example of a fast starter. Second part of your question said, or others that pick up from last year's form. Yeah, I think that's probably unquantifiable because it would depend on how much time they're taking off between last year's last start and then your first start on the next year. So you would have to set a few parameters there, right? You'd have to say, okay, I'm only looking at players that took 3 or 4 weeks off, that sort of thing. And then you could run the numbers. It would just be a little bit too hard to parse for me. So not something I'm looking at, Anointed. You could have some fun with the numbers, right? Just might be a little bit of a headache. I'm just giving you a little bit of a heads up there. But yeah, on the first half of that, really easy to look at that. Just look at round one scoring averages. And, Keegan is one of those fast starters. Same thing with a Cameron Young. Those are great first round leader bets, if that's the angle that you're looking for. And John says, I don't understand why Mackenzie Hughes nor Neesmith aren't teeing it up this week. Both are Carolina guys. I'm not sure if they qualified. So with these invitational events, a lot of it comes down to qualification. And I'm not 100% sure of what it was. Maybe they just declined the invitation and they weren't in the field, or they didn't qualify. And I would have to say, because it's a no-cut event, you get a guaranteed check, John, that they probably didn't qualify. I would imagine if they got in, they'd play, right? Because you're saying, I don't understand why. I don't understand why either. That makes no sense to me. It's a guaranteed check. I mean, you have guys like Daniel Berger that have shown up to no-cut events, hit one golf shot, and then pieced out. And they're like, hey, guys, it was nice seeing you here on the first tee. I'm out of here, right? And it took his last place check. It's a thing. So yeah, dude, I'm as surprised as you are. I think he should be there, right? Especially if he qualified, but he may not have qualified. So we talked about Scotty. I like him quite a bit here. So 1 second, a little dry throat here. I love Matty Fitz still, and he's the same kind of player as a John Rahm, right? Where he's getting really long off the tee. And that's something like I have to give Matty Fitz credit for. And God, I hate Matty Fitz. He's probably my least favorite player on tour. But the man is getting borderline elite with his accuracy and his distance off the tee, is posting some of the best off the tee numbers that we've seen. So if you look at him, what is he gaining? 0.5 shots per round off the tee. That's more than JT. Now, that's not a Sanjay, Scotty Scheffler, Rahm, or a Rory sort of level, but it's a lot better than people want to give him credit for. And when you look at his short game, he outpaces all of those players by far. So, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Matty Fitz. And this has been despite not being in the best form, right? He doesn't have a win over this stretch. He doesn't have a bunch of these top 5, top 10 finishes. He's been posting a lot of these shots gained metrics without really getting paid off on it. And those sort of players are the ones I want to get to, because golf is a variant sport. We know that. There's going to be times where things don't go your way as a golfer. Of course, as a DFS player, those things are going to coincide with each other. But Matty Fitz has been doing the right things, right? He's still short game wizard. Off the tee is putting himself in position just has to capitalize with those irons. And we've seen it before, right? It's not like we're asking some Herculean thing to happen, something that's never happened before, something like that to happen. We're just asking him to go out there and, I don't know, gain 2 strokes on approach, 3 strokes on approach over 4 rounds, and he could win this golf tournament. But he has all the skills necessary: the length off the tee to cut corners, the accuracy to keep it in play and not get into trouble. I love the fact that he's coming in where he is in ownership, right? As of right now, I have him at 13.1%, which is, I would say, enough to eat. 25%, you could play him in, that sort of percentage in your lineups, and you could get solid leverage there. Play him at 30%. If you're as convicted as I am, right? You want to make sure that you're getting that leverage to the field. So love him there. Definitely not getting off of that. Sam Burns, I have to say, I don't want to talk too much about this because I don't want to pump up his ownership by any means. He's also that same sort of player. Now, not as accurate, but you still have those 50-yard wide fairways. So that's the one thing I do worry about. But on Bermuda, maybe the best putter in the world. It can get hot in a hurry. We've seen that just time and time again on Bermuda. Also a great iron player, and off the tee has the distance to cut the corners off. And when Sam Burns wins golf tournaments, he's able to hit fairways, because at the Sanderson Farms, that's a golf course you have to hit fairways at. In fact, when we do our correlation analysis, typically driving accuracy is one of the most important stats around Country Club of Jackson, and he's won there at this point. And then at the Valspar Championship, it's the same sort of story. Off the tee play, both distance and accuracy is the key. And those are my 2 key stats, right? Off the tee play is kind of what I'm using to differentiate the field. That's what Sam Burns does well. So again, I'm not going to talk about it too much here because I don't want to pump up his ownership, but I got a sinking feeling about Sammy Burns this week. And every single time this guy has won, I've bet him, and I have bet Sam Burns this week. And every single time that he's won, I've played him in DFS over 30% on lineups, and I'm playing him at 30% this week. So he's hit both metrics there. So he's definitely got that going for him. Victor Holland, on the other hand, is getting the firm and fast treatment. And if you've been here for a while, when Victor Holland has to deal with around the green play, particularly difficult around the green shots, count me out. I want nothing to do with it. I've seen it happen in person. The guy literally shakes when he's under pressure. And this is not me taking shots at him. He looks like a different human being when he's in contention on a Sunday. He doesn't look like that happy, jovial kid that's going out there having a good time like he is through, Thursday through Saturday. He looks like he's got to take a shit. Honestly, that's what it looks like. I've said it before to people on site, and they laugh. I go, you're right? I'm like, I know, because I've seen it before. Come on. I hope he figures it out at some point, but he's got the yips. It's especially on the green when he's trying to lag putt in contention. I mean, the announcers, they're going to point it out almost every single time. And around the green, it's the same thing. He has the same sort of yips with his distance. I can't be there at a difficult golf course, right? But, at an easy track last week where he was a core pick, I had to be on him because it made all the sense in the world. But I don't know if I can do it this week. It's just, winning score was 11 under par for the Palmetto. You're looking at firm and fast conditions this time around. If he was single digit owned, I'd be on Victor this week, but not as chalk, not as 17.5% owned. So I'm off of him. I have to leave it up to imagination with Max Homa and Colin Murakawa there. On the Patreon page, of course, is where I have all of that information. But still love Tom Kim, 15.5% owned. I don't know why people aren't buying in on the kid. He's just a clear stud at this point. I think he's a top 5 player in the world already. I think he may potentially be a top 3 player in the world here within the next 2 years in terms of official world golf ranking. And yeah, I'm on board with the whole, this kid's going to be a world number 1 someday, 100%. He's that pedigree of player. And the last thing I needed to see to really cement this is he was the last guy on the range today, per a tweet that the PGA Tour put out, of course, right? They're going to cherry pick that, kind of like they've done with Bryson in the past, trying to push up his popularity, posting like, oh, look, Bryson's the last one on the range. They wouldn't do if it was anybody else, right? Now their darlings, Tom Kim, that they're trying to hype up on social media. He looks like the real deal. And if he's got the work ethic too, which, that's kind of like what that was indicating to me, then book it. The kid's a stud. John has a question. He says, any updates on Berger's health? Yeah, the only updates I've seen from him, and of course he's a South Florida guy, is a couple of buddies of mine actually saw him out on his boat. He was fishing about a couple of weeks ago. So that was the last update that I've seen from him. But on social media, he's just hanging out on his boat. He's fishing. He's cooking on social media. It doesn't look like he's playing much golf. In fact, I haven't seen a golf club in Daniel Berger's hand in at least 6 months. Like at least since the last time that we've seen him on tour. I think he may have given up golf for a little bit. Like truly, I think he may have just quit the sport for a little bit, and he'll probably come back. There hasn't been any information. I don't know if something's going on. I don't want to speculate on it. But he's been away from the game. He is not engaged with good old golf. And if he is, I think it's just been for like ad shoots or maybe playing with buddies, that sort of thing. Maybe he needed some time off. Maybe he was burnt out, that sort of thing. I would totally understand that. And when he comes back, I can tell you, Daniel Berger's not the type of guy that needs to practice all that much. Him and Brooks Koepka both went to FSU, very similar sort of human beings, let alone golfers. They're also very similar golfers. They don't need much practice. Like they can go out there. They're field players. They're more mental than anything, particularly with Brooks. I mean, he's not necessarily the most technical player, but he's an absolute brute of a human being in a mental. His mental toughness is just probably number 2 on tour behind Tiger Woods. They don't need that much practice. I think he'll be okay. But yeah, he's been away from the game. I wish I knew why. He hasn't told us. I don't think he plans on telling us either. He's that kind of dude. He just doesn't give a shit. Like I said, he doesn't need to practice, doesn't need to be around the game or in the spotlight. That's just kind of his MO. Daniel Berger is just chilling. That's what he does. But I love Hideki here. He's a sleeper pick that I'll definitely be getting to. And the fact that Hideki's just being overlooked here is just making me lick my chops. I mean, I have to like him at 6.8% ownership. It's not really that much more to it. He's played well on firm and fast golf courses, and he's nearly a third the owned of Cameron Young, who I love. Cameron Young, young up-and-coming player. I think he's adequately priced, but I don't think he's a much better play than Hideki. And I think he's probably a little bit better of a play than a Terrell Hatton. So I think that, 15% versus about 12% on a Terrell Hatton isn't that big of a difference. Like, I don't think it's like a drastically over-owned play in that comparison. But when you make the comparison up here, right, Hideki nearly 7% on the higher end, 15% on the Cameron Young. That's ridiculous. He's not twice as likely to succeed as a Hideki Matsuyama. So that's why he's a fade for me. Terrell Hatton's just got the elite course history. He led the field in shots gained tee to green when they played the Palmetto Championship. He was a great Bermuda putter. And I hate saying that players are due, but Terrell Hatton's not playing poor golf, and he just hasn't gotten anything out of his game in terms of actual finishes. It's just the angry gnome's going to go off. He won I think it was 3 times within 6-7 months at some point about 2.5 years ago. He's a really good player. And I think a lot of the people that are newer to DFS don't know that about Terrell Hatton. This guy is an international winner and won prolifically for quite some time out there. And he's not really done that since then, but I like him at 8,500 for sure. Keegan after the win, no thank you. That's all you're going to get from me on that. Just no thank you. Not really anything I like about him this week. He's in form, but it's also Keegan Bradley, the most volatile player on tour. If you're going to count on him as an 8K golfer in this field and at the ownership level he's at, then have at it. I won't be there with you. Shane Lowry, $8,300. Love his around the green play. Love the price tag. I mean, he's way underpriced here for this field. He's not getting that much ownership. So I will say that about Lowry, even though he's blacked out. Absolutely love him. Montgomery's getting a little bit of ownership, but you can play him at 25% and get away with it. Sahith Theegala goes yet again criminally underowned. No one wants to play him, and you probably guessed that I'm playing him from that statement. Billy Horschel, though, is a guy I want to focus on here. He, first of all, loves Bermuda. We know that about Billy. And when you get him on a firm golf course, he seems to have a lot of success. In fact, his last win at the Memorial was on an extremely firm and fast golf course, right? Over there at Jack's Place. He loves making that place crusty, making it run a little bit faster than most PGA Tour events. And that's what you're going to get here. So he's played well here. Also, he won. Actually, did he win this? No, he didn't win the Scottish Open. No. Didn't win the Scottish Open. He played well at the Scottish Open. He's played well at link style courses over the last 3-4 months too. And he's gone over to the DP World Tour. I mean, he's played a lot of those style courses. He's also had success historically. So I like him at $8,000. He's just only 7.7% owned, and I think has a lot better chance of that to succeed. Griot is 11.7%. I don't know. It makes sense to me. He's a great play. Not going to keep me off him there. But Tom Hoge, oh boy. I love Tom Hoge. it pains me to put him down as a fade here. But when Tom Hoge is highly owned, when Tom Hoge is expensive, and $7,700 for this field is expensive for Tom Hoge. Now he could be $9,000 at a weak field event and not be overpriced, but $7,700 in this field's overpriced because just look at it. Tommy Fleetwood, right? $7,600, right? He's cheaper than Tom Hoge and he's less owned. That we could end our argument right there, right? So, love the guy to death. I will play him when he's low owned, particularly at a golf course that plays extremely short, but I don't think this is the week. Wilson says, thoughts on Brendan Steele? I love the price tag. I have to say that about Steele. I don't love the fact that he's in a strong field and has that horrible putter going. So I'm not going to be there myself, Wilson. But if you're looking for a high floor player, so somebody that's going to probably finish in the top 40, like no matter what, at least like the top half of the field, then take Brendan Steele. But I don't know if he has all that much top 5, top 10 upside. So that's the one downside there, but I don't hate it. Anointed says, what yardage? What is what? Okay, so you got to work on your wording with these questions, Anointed, so that we can get these. So I'm assuming you're saying like what's long off the tee. So is 310 yards long off the tee? Is 297 average? Yes, exactly. So right around 300 is your average length off the tee. It depends on your golf course. So for every single golf course, they'll normalize it. But over the PGA Tour season, the quote unquote average, I think, is like 303 yards now. 297 might have been a few years ago. A long player off the tee now is going to average right around a 300-yard carry. So that's usually the best way to look at it, is their carry distance. Because like I said, on different golf courses, you're going to get different amounts of rollout. But the guys that can consistently get it 300-yard carries are usually able to take it over corners and cut a lot of things off. And I think Matt Fitzpatrick's right around like that 305-yard carry. Anything like 305, 310-yard plus carry, I would consider elite distance off the tee, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a great question. Below average, I would say anything below 295 is when you're looking at a guy off the tee that's hardly getting there, right? He's got to be hitting a lot of fairways to probably even be on the PGA Tour at that point. So the fall off happens rather quickly, and those 2 to 3 yard carry differences make a huge difference there. Jeff says, how come your recent form ranking for Tom Hoge is 54? Because it counts all of his recent starts, right? So when you look at his recent form down here, you'll see that he's had a few decent starts, but he's also had a missed cut here, right? And it includes, I believe, the last like 8 or 9 events, right? So he has a missed cut there, a couple missed cuts there before, and then he has these decent top 10s. It's not like I'm looking at the last 4 events. So it's the last, I'm trying to think, it's last 36 rounds for this week. It's a floating number. When we're early in the year, my recent form ranking could be as little as like the recently 8 rounds. Like I think like when we were over there at Sanderson Farms, right? Just like a few events into the season, recent form would have only included a few events. But now that we're this far into the season, you have people that have DP World Tour stats being included into these calculations. It's opened up a little bit. So it includes a lot of bad results. That's why. Because he hasn't been all that good before his recent stretch. And, people that are only looking at the last 4 starts are going to be like, oh, this guy's in insane form. Well, yeah, zoom out a little bit, right? That's why, Jeff. It includes a larger sample size than you're probably expecting. And I think with recent form, that's something to consider. If you're only looking at the last 12 rounds for recent form, that truly is quote unquote recent form, but you're also opening yourself up to volatility, right? The more data points that you have, the less noise that you're going to have in your stats. And like, just to give you an example here, right? If we just took the last 3 starts here, let's cherry pick a really good example here. This would be a good one, right? So Hithagala, 5th place, missed the cut, and then 6th place. This missed cut because he probably lost, let's see, what event was that? And Sanderson Farms, yeah, he missed the cut rather violently there, are going to completely wash away these 2 starts here. So if we were looking at just a 3-event sample size, even if we included this 28th here, right? Try to give him just like a, middling finish, 28th versus Hithagala. You're going to really wash away that 5th and that 6th place finish. So when I'm looking at recent form, I include the last like 7 or 8 events to try and get a better idea of it, right? Including a 13th, including a 57th place finish. So rather than getting a lot of this noise, because like to give you an example, Taylor Montgomery, like he looks like a god, right? Like his last 3 starts. Keegan Bradley, right? Win 5th and then a missed cut, right? if you lower the sample size, it kind of it can really screw your calculations. It can, especially if you're using shots gained metrics and then using that in your modeling to project players. If you're using that small sample size, it really fucks things up. I'll just say that from a stat perspective. Like, I don't use things less than a 24 round sample size in anything. Like 24 rounds is the smallest sample size that I will even consider using for any sort of analysis. And I would say the average is probably like 36. 36 is kind of like the sweet spot that I use for a lot of my calculations, because that, is 9 full events. That's typically about 11, 12 starts, because not every player is going to make every single cut. So it's usually like the last 11, 12 starts. That'll give you a really good idea of not only how somebody's been playing of late, but their general direction coming in, their momentum as a player, which I think is extremely important when looking at DFS, because people are reactionary. Like, the reason why he's 15% owned this week is because people are looking at those last 4 starts. The fact of the matter is, you should have been on him the last 4 weeks like I was. I've played him for all 4 of those starts, and I have no attachment to him now because he's getting all this ownership in a field where he's not really deserving of that price. I mean, Siwoo Kim has had a pretty decent stretch of form there too, right? I mean, Emilio Grillo has been in the same stretch of form. Why is Grillo less owned than Tom Hoge, right? When Grillo's probably a better course fit here. It's just people are a little bit reactionary. Like, and even to give you an idea up top, I mean, the Rory McIlroy is not reactionary, but Victor Hovland certainly is, right? He's been kind of shit for quite a while now. I played him last week because I thought the course fit worked, and it did. That's why he went out there and finished in the top 5. But to say that he should be chalk now after a 1 week's performance is ridiculous, right? I'm not going to hold myself attached to these players just because they played well for like 1 or 2 performances. So that's why. And that's treated me extremely well over the years, using a little bit longer term sample size. And I don't want to say it's like what fish do, but like when you're looking at the game log, like a lot of the people that like casually play DFS do, that's their thought process, right? Like, they're looking at like the last 3-4 starts and like, okay, who's coming in hot? And they're going to play the guys that are hot, that are seemingly cheaper than they should be. That's like your casual PGA DFS player, right? Whereas, if you're trying to actually do your analysis, I think you need to take a little bit of a step back and look at a player's big picture. Like, this guy's baseline, like, what does this guy do most of the time? Because sometimes they're just on a heater, right? Like, sometimes these guys, they just get hot for like 4 or 5 events. That happens all the time. And then they go right back to, irrelevancy 4 or 5 events later. It happens all the time. You see it, just like Ricky Fowler, right? He might go out there this week and finish in like the top 10 again. I'm playing him this week. I'll just tell you that about Ricky Fowler. I am playing him. And then like a couple weeks from now, he could go back to just be the shit Ricky Fowler that we've seen for the last 2 years. Would not surprise me. That's just the flow, the ebbs and flow of the PGA Tour out there that we see almost every single week. Let's see what we got. Oh, yeah, I already answered that word. All right. Let's move on to this bottom half of the 7K range. So we talked about Hoagie. Talked about Grillo. Talked about why I like, Fleetwood there. He's just a better player than Tom Hoge for $100 less and lower ownership. It's worth noting that Jason Day and Cameron Davis are both Australians, and this golf course is kind of suited towards Australian players. It's a sandbelt course. That was the design feature that Tom Fazio was going for. So that's worth noting. Ricky Fowler likes himself these sort of courses too. You've seen him have success at the Waste Management Open, the Shriners, all these sort of events where you have natural areas. So that's a reason to play him. And of course, he looked really good last week. And I wasn't there, so I have to say I kind of missed out. But there's reasons to play him once again. Sepp Straka, love his accuracy off the tee. Also really like the form coming in, so I'm there. Talked about Henley a lot, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Excuse me here, guys, a little bit of gas. Other than he's 6% owned, right? So he's coming in as a low-owned player, as we'd hope. Just hopefully this putter on Bermuda can come around. He's been absolute dog shit for, just look at this. The last 24 rounds for Henley have been really rough. He's down here at 7,300. He's losing 0.6 shots per round with the flat stick. Just not going to get it done. Has to regress back to that baseline, which is a positive putter on Bermuda. Keith Mitchell's a fade for me, and it's just ownership based. He's about 3 times as owned as everyone else around him. You can see he's 3 times as owned as a JT Poston, twice as owned as a Russell Henley. And while I think that he brings upside to the table, he's also an extremely volatile player, an extremely random player that pops seemingly out of nowhere. So anytime that he gets a ton of ownership, I'm just going to have to go the other direction. There's never really a course that's going to fit him to a tee where you just have to play Keith Mitchell. And I usually take shots on him when he's like 5-6% owned. And, this price tag makes sense, right? 7,200. I do think that might be what's attracting a lot of people to him. But I still like JT Poston, who's an ambassador for this course, has played here at least 50 times that he's quoted to the media, and it likes it. That's the one thing that he's said publicly about the course. He loves that it plays firm and fast. He loves that it rewards the better short game players, because that's exactly what JT Poston is. So I'll be getting there. And Keith Mitchell, I was hoping he'd be low owned. I do want to add this little aside here. If he would have been like 8% owned, I know it's only like 4.8% difference. I would have started to consider playing him, because, I think he brings upside, but I'm not going to play him in 30% of my lineups, or even 25%. They're going to have to get leverage there. I'd be a lot more comfortable playing him closer to like 15, maybe 12% in an ideal situation. Just, not 25%, 30. Like you'd have to get leverage there. Seamus Power, I'll be playing. I like taking him at courses that are a little bit firmer off the tee, so you can get a little bit more distance, because he does lack distance off the tee. So he's not going to be able to cut the corners like a lot of our top end players could, but we're starting to get down to the value tier. These guys aren't going to be perfect course fits. Just at 5.2%, a better player than his peers. Davis Riley, I'm going right back to it. He's probably going to screw me again, but I'm getting there. It's just a better player than people want to give him credit for, and loves Bermuda. That's the thing that really convinced me there, right, is the Bermuda numbers. We know that when he's going to spike with the flat stick, which is exactly what's been holding him back of late, it's going to be on Bermuda grass. And you can see the only category where he's a negative over his last 24 rounds is on the greens. So if we can get him out there just slightly gaining, I think he's going to finish in the top 25, let alone if he has his typical baseline performance of right around 2 shots gained putting over the weekend. I like Chris Kirk here, 3% owned, a sleeper pick I'm getting to. I like the fact that he's accurate off the tee. He checks that box for me, has played ball in firm and fast conditions, and on Bermuda is his best self. It's by far his best split when it comes to his putting. Gains right around 0.12 shots per round. And of late has been kind of quietly just ball striking it up, just doing what Chris Kirk does. You can see right around in neutral off the tee, pretty much neutral in all the 4 categories, which again, is just kind of what he does. He's above average in every category, but from time to time will spike in any one category. I mean, he's more than capable of gaining 5 or 6 strokes on approach. He has spike putting performances all the time on tour. The real X factor's off the tee. He's got to go out there, find a way to gain like 3 strokes off the tee, which isn't anything crazy. It's not like he has to have a ceiling performance, but he's got to contribute off the tee in some fashion. And at a golf course where off the tee, a lot of players are going to be hitting into hazards, if he can just avoid the hazards, that might be how he can gain 3 strokes to the field, because I can guarantee you, because of the no-cut event, almost every player in the field is going to have at least like 2 unplayables, at least 2, or penalty strokes. I'll include not only unplayables, but penalty strokes with that. They're going to have at least 2 over the week. I don't imagine anybody's going to get away with less than 2. Chris Kirk, right, if he can limit those, like be one of the few players that only has like 2 or 3 penalty strokes over the week, that would be his way to the top 10 or to the top 15 of this event. And at $6,600, that might be enough to get you into an optimal lineup. So I do like that angle there. Let's see what we've got. Tyler says, love the content, bro. What do you think about this tournament matchup? Okay, Spieth versus Lowry and Cam Young versus Murakawa. You got that first one's a matchup between 2 of my darlings. I love Shane Lowry, love Jordan Spieth. Wow, that's a tough one, because the skill set for Spieth and Lowry that I really like for them this week is the same. It's their around the green play. It's their golden hands that they're known for. Oh boy. Okay, I got to look at their shots gained metrics. That's going to be the that'll be the tiebreaker, because I love both of those guys this week. Let's see. So Jordan's doing his thing, gaining across the board. He played exceptionally at the President's Cup. We got to give him credit there. And oh boy, Shane Lowry's doing the same thing. So I'm going to say Jordan Spieth, just because of what he was able to do at the President's Cup. Was the guy who went out there, scored 5 points for America, but that's a close one. And your second is Cam Young versus Murakawa. I would have to say Murakawa, just because of his accuracy off the tee. You're talking about a tournament-long matchup So what I like about Murakawa is his consistency, right? He's going to keep himself out of those hazards a lot more than a Cameron Young. And while I think Cam Young has spike upside to potentially win this event, he's not going to finish higher from a 50-50 standpoint than a Murakawa just because of those hazards off the tee. So yeah, I would go Spieth and then Murakawa, but that first one is damn close. Nick says last man in, Poston or Power. Oh boy. God, you're asking me these questions between my sweethearts, guys. You guys are giving me hard decisions to be made. But if they're your last man in, this is an important decision. So it's one we'll think about here for a little bit. 1 second. Let's go to the metrics, which I already know what it's going to say. It's going to say that JT Poston's a much better play. Yeah, right. So except for off the tee, Poston's gaining across the board. Seamus Power is losing both off the tee and on approach. Yeah, man. If you're only going to be able to play one of them, I would say play JT Poston. I mean, if you're able to play both of them, then great. I mean, that would be the ideal situation. But yeah, Poston's got the better shots gain metrics. And he's the ambassador for the golf course that has a lot of familiarity with Congaree Golf Club. Has done a lot of the charity work over here with Congaree. Yeah, that had to be JT Poston. He's got multiple things working for him. Planet Warrior says, thoughts on Kitayama? Great question. So I've gone back and forth on Kitayama, I think like 4 times to this point. So he's $7,100. He's got that volatility to him where if you're going to play him, you have to know what you're getting yourself into. And I would consider Sibu a similar player. Davis Riley is the same sort of volatility. I mean, even Cam Young, honestly, but he's just like a luxury, like BMW version of these volatile little beamers down low. But Kurt Kitayama, I have to say, when he has things working, they go really well. I mean, look at his Honda Classic result. That's where I was kind of introduced to Kurt Kitayama, and I got the experience because off the tee, this man doesn't hit many fairways, but look at his numbers at the Honda Classic. That man hit almost every single fairway that week. And when he does so, he gains in bunches off the tee because the guy is long off the tee. I think a lot of people don't give Kurt Kitayama that credit. So if you're going to catch him on the right week, you're going to get paid off paying him. But because of that inaccuracy off the tee, I could see him laying an egg, right? I could see him going out there and finishing almost dead last at this sort of event. Because when you're off at this course, you're taking it unplayable. I don't want to say half the time, but I think a third of the time is probably a good measure for that. At least a third of the time, you're probably taking some sort of penalty stroke when you miss the fairway here. That could be an issue for Kurt. But hey, the Honda Classic is one of the tightest off the tee courses that you're going to have. I lost an entire box of golf balls when I've played there before. No joke. And I'm a single digit handicap golfer. That just should tell you the difficulty of some of the off the tee shots around Honda, PGA National up there, the championship course. I don't know. Kitayama, I'm like 50-50 on. I've had him in my pool about 5 times to this point. I've taken him out. To this point, he's out of my player pool, but I understand the sentiment. It's just you got to be a little bit of a madman to play him. That's for sure. You gotta have some stones to you, right? To go out there and play Kitayama in a bunch of lineups. Tyler says, "Thank you for your thoughts." Of course, man. Gotcha. And he said, you got a feeling non-chalk is winning, maybe even a 6K guy. Yeah, I'm not playing a lot of the chalk up top either. You can see, I'm not playing Rory, not playing a few guys that are going to be popular, but I wouldn't be surprised. This is kind of my gut feeling here. One of these 8K guys wins. Somebody here from Tom Kim down to Billy Ho. I think these guys have a lot more win equity than people are giving them credit for. I mean, a Jordan Spieth, right? You guys know I'm playing Jordan Spieth. That's why he's blacked out here. I think you guys know I'm playing my boy Jordan Spieth, particularly if we're going there to the golf tournament in person. I think I'm playing Jordan Spieth. All of these sort of guys have a lot more win equity than at least the price tag would indicate, and they're really easy to fit into lineups. So, if you think a 6K guy is going to win, then scattershot him. Play a bunch of 6K guys this week. But yeah, that's kind of my gut feeling there with the 8K range. I think it's going to be a good one. Let's finish off this player pool talk. So who did we finish off with? We talked about Poston. We talked about Power a little bit here. I don't know if we talked about Davis. Actually, we did because we talked about Chris Kirk down here. Let's get to Gary Woodland. So Gary Woodland still playing his crusty ass down there at $6,400. Yeah, he's just a better player than his price tag, $6,400. And he's still only 3.7% owned. So no one wants to play him. I understand it. You look at the recent form, you're going to go, eek. You're going to have no interest in playing Woodland. But his shots gain metrics aren't reflective of a withdraw, missed cut, 64th, 51st, missed cut over there. Now, the one question mark, the one reason not to play him would be the withdrawal, right? You'd be like, oh, well, what about the injury? I don't care about it if he's 3.7% owned. I'm going to play him in 7% of my lineups. And if he ends up withdrawing, like, so be it. Like, I'm really not going to lose sleep over it. It just is what it is. It's 7% of my 100% of lineups. And it's a risk that I'm willing to take. Now, if that's not a risk that you're willing to take, then don't play them, right? It's that simple. It's not like you have to play somebody that's $6,400. You have Brendan Steele here that you could play. There's a lot of other guys in this range that I'm playing outside of a Gary Woodland. So it's, like I said, it's not the end all be all. It's not like I'm playing them in 20% of my lineups. But yeah, I'm going to be playing Gary Woodland's crusty ass. And at the bottom, it's a lot of these Korean players. So I personally don't have any interest in them. They're a lower tier tour than what you had for the Japan tour. So while I liked a lot of those Japan tour players, I don't have much interest in anybody but Bio Kim, who I'm still not playing myself, but I do have interest given that he's probably the highest upside player of those players. And then I guess Ches Reavie, right? He's the only PGA Tour guy down there, and he's $6,000, and he's accurate off the tee. He's at the very least got that going for him. What we'll do now is we're going to go through a few lineups together. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, go over to Draftkings, and we'll wrap it up here with a few prize picks notes too. So if you've been playing on prize picks at the end, we're going to go through that. And just something to note too is it is NBA season. So as of right now, there's an NBA slate going on. But on Wednesdays, I'm going to take off from NBA. I've decided, I was like, do I want to move the live stream today? Because NBA is my moneymaker. I have to say that. Like, you can see I have a little bit extra money in the bank, Rohan, and I still have all of my PGA lineups like accounted for, which is over $3,000 of lineups for the CJ Cup. Because like on opening night, I won a GPP for NBA. That's just like something I do with NBA. I win a lot over there. It's where I put all of my bankroll when it comes to DFS. But on Wednesdays, I'm not going to play. I've decided, I'm going to dedicate my time to the live stream, make sure that we're here. We're not going to move the live stream up or anything like that. We'll do it at our normal time, and I'll make my lineups, right? I'll spend my entire Wednesday evening doing my lineups, which takes away a little bit from what I do for NBA, which I take extremely seriously, which a lot of you don't know about because I refuse to do content on it. It's a lot of people will ask about it. I refuse to do NBA content. If you want prize pick stuff, I consider doing that, right? You don't play against me when it comes to prize picks, but it's pretty hard to get any NBA information out of me. I'll just say that. It's like trying to pull teeth, which I had to have a tooth put into my mouth today, actually. I had a crown come off a few nights ago during that Monday night game, and I had to have it replaced today. So, side, I don't know why that came up, but aside, yeah, that happened. Let's get into this, though. So, the whole point of that being, though, with the NBA stuff is, like I said, I'm still going to be doing the streams here at night at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. There was a lot of talk going around that I might move it up to like midday, something like that. But I know a lot of you guys are working that sort of thing. And I want to make sure that you guys have the time slot to ask these questions, because a lot of you can't take the time off during your job, right? Not working at a computer, that sort of thing. Some of you have that luxury, but I want to make sure we can account for everybody out there. So it's a little bit of a self-sacrifice that I have to make for this, but it's all well worth it. All worth it to give you guys that info. Let's move on, though, for the GPP build. So what we're going to do here is go through my thought process when hand building for a large field GPP. And we got to consider ownership here. My player pool does a good job of that inherently. So it's not like we have to think about it too much. But I want to show you guys a few of the different builds that I was considering. And what I think a lot of people are going to do is they're going to force in one of these top four players, right? Like a JT, Scheffler, Rahm, or Rory. I'd say at least 80, 90% of the field is going to have at least one, if not two of those players. And if you wanted to just find a real sneaky way, right, to kind of differentiate yourself just right off the bat, I don't know, start with a Matty Fitz, maybe somebody that's not as chalky. I know somebody earlier was like, oh, I don't think the chalk wins. Hey, well, maybe it's because Matty Fitz ends up stealing it, right? The guy that I absolutely hate, but I have to give credit where credit is due. Sorry, guys, this give me a little bit of gas there. But like I said, if you want to get different, right, maybe you just fade those top four guys. Now, that takes some balls, but in my set of 150 lineups, damn sure I'm doing so. And heck, there's even a few lineups that I'm starting with the Sam Burns at $9,300. But by doing so, not only does it keep you off of those four players, it gives you a completely different build. You can be a lot more balanced. I mentioned that I love this 8K range, and you can pepper it if you go out there with the strategy. I mean, you could take these four players and still have $7,200 remaining. Go down into the 6K range, maybe take that one guy that you want to take a shot on. Perhaps it's Gary Woodland, right? Maybe you really think that he's got a top 10 performance in him, which is well within his range of outcomes, and you still have 8,100 remaining. I mean, truly, you take one value pick, and then you can take all these guys that I think have a bunch of top 5, top 10 equity and round out a lineup. That's a perfect way to differentiate yourself. And not a lot of people are going to be willing to do so. So if you're trying to take a lot of really good players, but not necessarily just like fade everyone because of their ownership, I think that's the best way to do so, is to kind of just fade the top of the board. If you want to be a little bit more traditional, which for like 80% of my lineups is going to be what I'm doing this week, it is to take one of the top 4 players, which understandably is a good situation. So let's go ahead and put Scotty in there for our second man in. Let's go ahead and put Sammy Burns. We could probably afford that. And you can see now we're in a different situation. We're already at 7,500, right? Not with 4 man in, or we hit 7,400, 2 people in, right? We're already down to that sort of level. So, we might be able to take one of these 8K options, right? Like maybe a Taylor Montgomery in the 7K range. Let's say like a Tommy Fleetwood here. And we're now at that same metric for our last 2 spots, right? 72.5. But look at our, next 3 man in, right? Our top 2 guys are pretty solid, but now we have a 7K option. Now we're down to Taylor Montgomery rather than somebody like a Jordan Spieth up there or somebody like a Tom Kim at $8,900. You have to sacrifice here in the mid tier, but then you're also taking players that are more chalky. I mean, like think if you're taking a Rory, right? Not only are you down to less salary, but then you're also taking an extremely chalky guy up there that's going to make you much, much more likely to be duplicated. So that's kind of the things that you should be thinking about when you're going through and making a lineup. Whereas in cash, I love playing Rory, right? He's going to be super high owned. I love Tom Kim for cash. In cash, I also like getting to like a Griot, these ball strikers, and Aaron Wise for cash is a great play. Down the 6K range, I mean, Gary Woodland is a great cash play at $6,400. And you can round it out with your favorite option at $7,900. So it's not very hard to build cash lineups here. I mean, you probably want Rory in cash. I'd say Tom Kim's a really good cash play. I mean, to be honest, the cash lineup here isn't as straightforward as it would be most weeks. I mean, you want to take the highest owned player on the slate. That's pretty self-evident. If you wanted to start a little bit cheaper, which, a lot of times I advocate for that, is to just try and make a more balanced cash lineup. Maybe you start with a Sanjay then, right? And maybe your next man in is a Victor Hovland because he's relatively high owned. And then a Cam Young, for example. Now, just based on what I'm seeing right here, this is probably the side that I would stray towards where, Aaron Wise like 15%, nearly 20, nearly 20% on this MGM. You're taking 4 chalky plays, but also it's a little bit more balanced. So, out of the 2 cash lineups or cash cores that we just put together, I would probably prefer this one over the other one that we went with. So that's my thoughts on that end. Let's see if there's any questions down there before we hop into the prize pick side. Let's see what we got. You just had some Crown 2. Hopefully they didn't charge you. They didn't, actually. It's completely covered by my insurance. But I was eating one of those caramel apples where like they have like the caramel on it. And like I literally forgot that I had a Crown. Like when you have one for so long, you forget that they even exist. And it came out and I like took the lollipop out and my tooth was in it. And I thought I had broken the tooth in half because I forgot that I literally had a crown there. So I started freaking out, obviously. I was like, oh my God, did I just like snap my tooth in half? When is it going to start throbbing like an SOB? But yeah, it was just a crown. It took about 5 minutes. They glued it back on. But yeah, it was covered by my dental insurance. So good on my dental insurance being looking out for me there, right? Covering the whole copay and everything. Let's move into prize picks real quickly, though. If you have any questions, make sure to go ahead and toss them down in chat now. I'll cover them after we finish the prize picks talk. And they have this board priced to just seemingly, it just doesn't make sense. So like the lower tier players like a Sepp Straka, Gary Woodland, Ricky Fowler at 4 birdies, right? And then at 4.5 birdies, 0.5 higher, are like Rory McIlroy, John Rahm, and Scotty Scheffler. So something's wrong here, right? These guys at the top are either way underpriced or these guys at the bottom of the board are way overpriced, right? There's no in between. One of those two things is true. And what I think it is that the guys at the top are a little bit underpriced. I think these guys like Rory, John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, they opened the week at 5 birdies. I thought that was a fair line. Now, I wouldn't take the over at 5 birdies, right? Getting to 6 birdies is a completely different scenario than getting to 5. But now that they're at 4.5, I have them at well over a 50% chance of hitting the over here. So I like the entire top row when it comes to overs on birdies. And in fact, pretty much the top 3 rows. I mean, you can include this entire row here, all Max Homa, Morikawa, all these sort of players. It's only when you start to get down to like Hideki and Jason Day where I'm starting to look at them for fades. And at the bottom of the board, guys like a Siwoo Kim, for example, Ricky Fowler, Sepp Straka, like these sort of players should probably be at 3.5 birdies, not closer to like 4.5, like the guys here at the top of the board. So I don't understand it. This is the first time that the board has looked like this. So I've just slammed the guys at the top. That's really how I handled that. Strokes, I didn't play anything. I haven't played one strokes prop. The issue I have is that we saw this course for the Palmetto Championship, and there are guys that are going to shoot low under par. But you're going to have these guys like a John Rahm, for example, like a Rory McIlroy, that could make 7-8 birdies tomorrow, but make 3 double bogeys, right? And shoot like 2 under par and go over their strokes prop. Like, why wouldn't I take birdies or better? You're just not exposing yourself to a lot of that variance. So if anything with strokes, I'd take overs because then you want that variance to happen, right? You want a player to hit into the fescue, hit into the marsh, hit into a rocky area where he has to take an unplayable, something along those lines. Whereas, with birdie or better, you don't have to worry about that. Like the worst that can happen if somebody hits it into a marsh is like, oh, well, they have one less hole to make a birdie. That's kind of my thought process. But if you're going to take advantage, or I should say embrace that volatility, I guess take overs for strokes. Birdie or better matchups are meh, never my favorite. The average for GIRs was 11.7 back in 2021. So it'd be a lot of unders here. I like the Billy Horschel under when it comes to greens, but outside of that, pretty much the whole board, I would shade towards an under. In fairways hit, the average was 9.5. So there's a few guys I like the over on. I talked about John Rahm for taking an over at 9.5 fairways, but there's actually quite a few guys that take the over on, particularly like the super accurate drivers off the tee, just because they're 51-yard wide fairways. And the players that are the best on tour from distance from center of fairway are going to have a hard time even missing like 3 or 4 fairways. Like they're going to hit 12, 13 almost every single round. There's quite a few overs for fairways that I would consider too. But that is all I've got for this stream. Unless there's any questions down in chat, I'm heading out of here. We do have one. Nick says, thoughts on Smalley? I love Alex Smalley. Aggressive player. Off the tee, has the distance you're looking for and relatively accurate. So, his best skill set is something that he should be able to lean into. The only downside is his volatility, right? He deals with accuracy issues from time to time. So I'll be playing Alex Smalley, but not super aggressively, like 15, 18% sort of ownership. Nothing overboard, but yeah, still getting them in my pool. But that is all I've got, boys. Appreciate everybody stopping by as per usual. I'm going to bed here in about an hour. So I'm going to finish up my lineups. I have most of them made. My build is almost done on my optimizer. Get that uploaded and wake up right around 3 a.m. and head up there to Ridgeland, South Carolina, middle of nowhere. South Carolina, in other words. But we'll be on site for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then, like I mentioned, I'll be at the Sunday night football games cheering on my Steelers. So I'm looking forward to the weekend. I'll still be trying to do these live streams for Showdown. So rounds 2, 3, let's say for at least rounds 2 and 3, you can count on there being a Showdown stream. It'll happen whenever I get back to my hotel room after I get back from the event. Round 4, I'm not so sold on because I am leaving after the round Saturday and coming back down to my house. So it's very unlikely that I'll have a round 4 Showdown stream, right? Because I'll have to be driving home, that sort of thing. So rounds 2 and 3, look out for that live stream. But until then, guys, best of luck with all of your lineups, and I'll catch you guys next time.